We have a lot of ground to cover today. As you can imagine, influencers in the travel industry, like the rest of the travel industry, have changed a lot because of COVID. So we have a lot to go over today to bring you all up to speed on where the travel influencer industry is at right now. So to start, my name is Matt Gibson. I am the CEO of a marketing agency called Upthink that specializes in working with travel influencers, travel bloggers to do influencer campaigns and create content for destinations and online travel agencies. I'm also the past president of the Professional Travel Bloggers Association, and once upon a time I was an award-winning blogger. Down at the end here, we have Mr. Paul Johnson. He is the editor of a luxury travel blog, which is the world's leading and oldest luxury travel blog. So if you have luxury products, this is the guy you're going to want to talk to. Amanda Ponzio Mutagi, in the middle here. She is the owner of Morocco Mama, which is the best known English language travel blog about Morocco and about food and travel in the MENA region. Last, we have Veronica Smulders here, and she is a Dubai-based editor, producer, and travel consultant behind Of Trips and Tales, who has also been featured by Condé Nast Traveler and Dubai Eye. So I am going to start with a brief overview of how COVID has affected travel influencers and working with travel influencers, and then we're going to go on to discuss these topics with the panelists. So, as you can imagine, COVID ruined a lot of travel influencers' jobs. I have done a small survey of influencers in my network. Here are some quotes from them. From Lily of Around the World L. Income was completely destroyed. This was February 2019 when most people's income went to zero. Gary Arndt of Everything Everywhere, who was at one point one of the 2 largest travel bloggers in the world, was devastated. He actually quit travel blogging after COVID. And Chris Christensen of the Amateur Traveler podcast, income cratered. He is also one of the longest standing travel bloggers and podcasters in the world. So it was devastating, as you could imagine, as it was for everybody. So it has changed things a lot because influencers had to pivot very quickly due to COVID. Everybody's income went from 100% down to 0 to 20%, generally speaking. So the ways that influencers pivoted, from my research, include the biggest thing that they did was they quit. A lot of them just quit completely, got jobs, went and did something else because they did not see a future in travel anymore. Of those who stayed, the most popular ways to pivot to make money during COVID were to launch new products and services. Some people would have launched services offering things like social media marketing. They would have offered consulting services. Some pivoted to offer travel-related products such as custom maps, t-shirts, things that their audience would buy. Many of them pivoted to create regional or destination-focused blogs. Now, in the past, you would have seen there was a large trend over the last 10 years of people starting around the world travel blogs, people traveling to all sorts of different destinations, getting free trips, and writing about travel around the world in general. During COVID, those blogs could not make money, but what could make money were blogs that were based on regional travel, a city guide for Dubai, or an Emirates-based blog. Morocco Mama is a very good example of this type of thing because she's focused on Morocco. Although people traveled a lot less during COVID, regional travel was the one kind of travel that still happened. So a lot of new regional focused blogs came up. Many people pivoted into different verticals, similar verticals such as lifestyle and food, things that were related to travel that their audience would still be interested in. And some of them just tightened their belts, they cut their costs, they started living off their savings and just decided to wait until COVID ended and spend that time just continuing to work on their travel blogs. A good example is Paul here. Paul just buckled down and said, I'm going to just keep working on my blog and make it better, and I'll come out better at the other end of this. So this is how many people pivoted. And this is what happened to working with influencers because of the way influencers have pivoted. The first takeaway about working with travel influencers, now, when I say travel influencers, I mean people who only focused on travel and travel alone. I am not talking about Instagram models who would travel sometimes and pose by the pool. I'm not talking about them. I'm not talking about lifestyle bloggers who would sometimes travel and talk about their trip. I'm talking about people who only did travel, okay? A lot of them had to close up shop and quit. There are very few left compared to before, which is a good thing for us, to be honest. We had way too many before COVID. I think a lot of you guys have tour companies, hotels, destinations, who has gotten way too many pitches from bloggers for free stuff before? Not anymore. It's yeah. It's not going to be the problem it was before because all those people had to go away because they didn't have a good business model. The people who are left are very good professionals with very good business models. And at least for a while, those are going to be the only real serious travel influencers around. So you're not going to have as much of a problem telling, is this person a good influencer? Did they just buy a bunch of followers? You know, that kind of thing. If you see somebody who is doing travel influencing pre-COVID and is still doing it today, you can be fairly confident that they're just really good at it because they survived COVID. So that's one bonus for us as an industry. One thing that changed, though, a lot is that these influencers that made it through COVID, they had to learn how to make money in a variety of different ways. And none of those ways included paid sponsored trips or free trips because that was not happening during COVID. There was no travel going on. So what they had to do, they found new income streams. They are not reliant anymore on income that comes from those kinds of sponsorships, and they're not reliant on free travel to create their content like they were before COVID. What that means is that they are less, they're more focused on finding only the trips that are right for them. They won't just accept any generic offer that comes their way because they don't need it like they used to. They're going to be focused on getting a really, really good fit with a good brand that is the kind of, that's going to offer the kind of experience their audience wants to hear about. And they're going to be looking for long-term partnerships. Now, this was a good thing pre-COVID anyways, but post-COVID, I think we have all learned that short-term relationships are not the most beneficial. When everybody's budget has gotten tighter, it's a much better use of money to spend more time working with the same people. There's a lot of benefit to that. So that's what a lot of bloggers are going to be looking for. Really, really good brand fits. And they're going to be looking for long-term relationships with people that are a good fit for them. So that's my very, very quick overview of what happened to influencers during COVID. And we're going to move on to our panel discussion here. And we're going to ask each of the panelists about how these things affected them. So our first question for the panelists is, how did COVID affect you and your business? Now, is there anyone who would like to go first? Paul, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi everybody. So I run a luxury travel blog, which is different from many other travel blogs, and it's not dependent on me traveling. It's more like an online travel magazine with contributions from lots of different people. So we had a lot of contributors that continued to contribute, but from a financial point of view, which I think is what you meant, Matt, is that right? You meaning specifically financially?
Yeah, primarily, how did it affect your business? Yeah. Which is, definitely financially.
People would normally sign up for these accounts on our site so they could share content with our audience. Obviously, that dried up because there wasn't a product for those people to sell. The existing writers that we had, most of them continued to produce content. There was a limit to what they could do, and that was something they could do productively that they would still benefit from in the long term. So we very much, although income probably dropped to about 20% of what it was, for me personally, that was never too much of an issue because I have another a holiday rental business in the UK that during COVID, when we weren't locked down at least, that was thriving. So in that respect, it was fine for me.
So Paul, who are the, this is a different business model than most bloggers have, offering accounts for people. Who are the people that are publishing on your blog with these accounts?
So it can be anything from hotels and resorts or even hotel groups, but it can also be yacht charter companies, private jet companies, travel agents, travel advisors, airlines. It is open to any travel business that's got a luxury focus.
Okay, interesting. And how is it rebounding now that COVID sort of?
Very much so. I mean, traffic to the site is higher than it was pre-pandemic, and sign-ups are growing again now. Yeah. Okay,
that's good to hear. Is traffic up to pre-COVID levels?
It's beyond what it was in previous. In fact, because we were still producing content and many people weren't, although our traffic dropped probably by about 20 to 25%, it wasn't as badly affected as it was for many people. And the traffic now is significantly above what it was before the pandemic.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so, Veronica?
Yeah, I find a similar situation from the content production perspective. Actually, my page grew dramatically in engagement while the content was either repurposed from previous trips or created locally. So we used to work with tourism boards to feature activities to do with families when traveling to different destinations outside the UAE. And during the pandemic, obviously, all of those projects were either in pause or canceled because of the uncertainty, because of the borders closing. And so definitely the income dropped dramatically. We focused a lot of the content in local production, which not only supported local business, but created higher engagement, I would say, in the long run for the page. In addition to that, I am a marketing and communications consultant. So during the time that the travel business was down, I switched the gears towards supporting companies in marketing and communications consultancy in the digital platforms.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of echo what they said, although I think in Morocco, we were closed longer than anybody else. So we're really just kind of coming out of this now since March. And as the others have said, I also have a secondary business to my website, which is doing culinary tourism for inbound tourists to Morocco, for English-speaking tourists to Morocco. So because we had such a long and uncertain closure of our borders, my business was decimated, for lack of a better word to put it. But like they have said also, post-COVID, my page, because I didn't pivot to do anything else. I just held out and said I'm going to double down on content and really focus locally, and when I could travel, start traveling where we could go. And since then, I've seen like my traffic, like Paul's, is double or triple what it was pre-COVID, and I'm seeing a lot more interest in not only Morocco but other destinations across the Middle East and Africa that I had not seen pre-COVID. So that's a really interesting change in the dynamics of where I think travelers from North America, which is where a lot of my readers are from, where they're looking to go.
Yeah, this brings up, with regards to the effects of COVID on website traffic, when I did my survey of bloggers who have come out of COVID okay, it seems like what you're saying is very similar, or what they're saying is similar to what Amanda has said, is that a lot of people found that for international travel, their traffic dropped dramatically, maybe down to 20% of what it used to be. And for that type of content, traffic has not returned to pre-COVID levels. A lot of it is still maybe 60, 70% of pre-COVID. Regional travel, however, has skyrocketed beyond pre-COVID levels because regional travel seems to be picking up so much more strongly. There's so much more interest in looking in regional travel. So those websites are doing exceptionally well coming out of COVID. So now on to our second question. How did you adjust to deal with the changes that obviously COVID, the devastation that COVID brought to all of us? Anyone? Paul? Paul.
Sure. So in my particular scenario, I was never really, I knew travel would return. Obviously, none of us knew that it would be quite as long as it was. But I took the opportunity to invest my time in the site, and we started creating a series of travel guides on a luxury travel blog, both country guides, city guides, regional guides, as a means of improving the site's SEO, so that when we did finally emerge from the pandemic, the site was in a stronger position. Not only were there fewer bloggers around, but obviously the site was better optimized for certain popular search terms. So I spent a lot of my time creating a new travel guide directory on the site and creating those guides, of which I think we've done at least 200 guides, each about 4,000 words, so it's quite substantial amount of work, and they're still growing now. We have people that are existing writers on the site that want to write these guides so that they command that search term and it goes to their account on the blog.
Yeah.
Yep, Veronica?
Our content, as I mentioned, grew dramatically and focused on how to support the UAE. And in fact, the audience received it so well that our most viral video was actually you don't need to leave the country to travel the world. Travel within the UAE and feel as if to 5 destinations and feel as if you were abroad, no? Because I think it wasn't only during the time that the borders were closed, but until certain time later, people were not confident and perhaps not able to travel abroad yet. So that allows them, they gave them the opportunity to fulfill these travel experiences within the UAE, no? And on hand with this, we also work with tour operators where the content was successfully driving business, to see how we could benefit from affiliate programs and commissions to actually drive people to those experiences, no? And in the third place as well, I had just opened a boutique travel agency to South America right during COVID times. So I worked during the year in the preparation to how to make that a success, and in collaboration with Expo as well, the presentation of Peru, and how we could build a business, in the future. And then as the borders in South America, in Peru in particular, opened, and hotels were relaunching in December many of the big hotels. I work with those hotels in producing advertisement for their relaunches. And so that tied it very well as well with my professional background in marketing and communications. And that resonated very well as a support in many of the hotels that we visited in South America. We were the first customers reopening after 2 years. So they were very interesting projects, and we could see also that a lot of the hotels and destinations that were previously catering honeymooners or solo travelers, such as Bali, for example, were now switching the focus on families traveling, and not only the core family traveling, but multi-generational families traveling composed of 15 or 20 people, no? The grandparents, the aunts, the parents, together with the children, no? And I think that trend is not going to be only temporary, but I think it's going to last long term, to use travel as an opportunity to reunite families, no?
Excellent, thank you. And how did you adjust, Amanda?
Yeah, so for a long time, I just kept holding out and saying nothing's going to change, like it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, everything's going to go back to normal. And then when I realized that was not probably the best way to go, I started creating a lot more content and going deeper, but also simplifying things. So where before it would try to be a little bit of everything, I was like, nope, we're going to just like really hone in and simplify and do exactly the type of content I want to do, and I think my readers and my followers are going to want. So when we were allowed to start traveling outside of the city where we live, we did a trip to far eastern Morocco where like tourists never go. And that got like so many people were like, didn't know this existed, we've never seen this, it's totally new, totally different. And then when our borders opened again, I did a trip to Egypt with my kids, my older kids, and we focused primarily on food, like very heavily on food. And so many people responded to say, I didn't even know this side of Egypt existed. So what I found was that the demand that was out there was really for a very specific type of travel, at least for my followers. And that's what I decided to focus on. So I just kept creating that kind of content. So it was going in, it was repurposing content. Like I had done a trip to Rwanda before COVID, and I repurposed all of that content and reshared it and was framing it in different ways and bringing it back to my audience. So even though we couldn't take those trips, it was finding ways, like Veronica said, to make the things that I already had work again for me. And to make it engage with people who were also sitting at home, right? Like they were still at home. And now what I've seen pay off as the world opens up again is people coming back to me and saying like, I just booked a trip to Morocco, and I'm actually going to Oujda, where you went, to the eastern Morocco. Or I never thought about, even here in Dubai, like last night I had somebody say like, I never had Dubai on my list, but after seeing your stories of the things that you've been doing since you're there, like now I'm thinking about it. So that's really rewarding, and I feel like finally there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
So I think all of your stories are very indicative of what I found when I surveyed other bloggers about how they made it through COVID and what they're doing. And I'd like to point something out for, I feel like I forget this sometimes. I know that a lot of people, when you think of influencers, you're going to think of a girl by the pool in a bikini on Instagram or somebody dancing on TikTok. That's what a lot of us think about is social media when it comes to influencers. And one thing that we have seen through COVID, there were travel influencers that were only on Instagram or specialized in Instagram. That was a thing pre-COVID. But during COVID, those people had no business model left because their business model relied on being able to travel and create new content constantly. So when you hear us talking about blogging more than other social media platforms, it's because blogs are what have enabled people to make it through COVID. Those are the kinds of blogs continue to generate traffic from SEO. Even if it drops during COVID, it's still something. And it's something that you can build. It's very difficult to build an Instagram account to grow in value over time, but you can grow, especially a regional blog, to gain more traffic over time. And so what we're hearing is a lot of Paul and Amanda taking COVID as an opportunity to create even more better content that will make them stronger coming out of COVID. And that's what has happened in a lot of cases. So what we've seen is a lot of travel influencers stopped working. A lot of the ones who have made it through spent the time improving, and they're coming out stronger, partly because they kept working, but also partly because there's less competition. So we're seeing a fewer influencers out there, but again, a much higher quality of influencers that are left now post-COVID, which is in a way really great. So we will move on to the last question that the whole talk was leading up to, is how do we work with influencers post-COVID? Now, when people are asking me about this, for my agency, I have clients coming to ask me what do we do now? You know, they're thinking about starting up their marketing again. And my recommendations tend to be similar to pre-COVID, not exactly the same. I do recommend looking at regional travel. Find the person who's a really good match for your core audience. You're looking for travelers from Morocco, somebody who has a very strong, or if you have a business in Morocco, somebody who has a destination-focused site about Morocco is going to be a really good match and a good fit for a long-term relationship. So I'm encouraging people to really don't look for a bunch of influencers to work with. That was something people did a lot before. Don't look for people to work with one time. Look for one good person or two good people to work with for the long term and develop a good long-term working relationship. That's what I'm really, really telling people to focus on now. So, but I would like to hear from the panelists though, coming out of COVID, what is the best way that you think people can work with both you and influencers in general?
I think content is king. So if the influencer has content that is insightful, useful, and valuable, then it's going to have a long-term effect. No? So identify those influencers that actually provide value through the content to stay relevant. And I think look for ambassadors that are not only influencers, but influential, that are going to speak about your business beyond social media, you know, that are going to talk about it and care really about your business and make it grow. And tied to that, make it their business as well, no? Work long-term, creating business opportunities that will benefit both sides, whether it is through affiliate programs or commission programs or revenue-generating programs, you know, that will make the relationship not just temporary, but long-lasting, no?
Yeah, I think that I totally agree with that. I also think go into it knowing what your goals are and what you're trying to get out of your relationship. If it's purely brand awareness, that's one thing. If it's sales and direct sales, that's another thing. You need to understand what your goals are, and then when you have the conversation with the influencer, that needs to be part of the conversation. It's hard for me to help you if I don't know what kind of help you need. And then a lot of times what I find is businesses end up disappointed because they're like, well, that's not what I hope to get out of it. Well, if I don't know what you hope to get out of it, I can't help you create a campaign that will do that. And on the point Matt made about regional things is don't necessarily assume the person that you're looking for is in the geographical location you think they'll be. So for example, I'm an American that lives in Morocco. Veronica is Peruvian and she lives in Dubai. Matt is Canadian and he lives in Thailand. Like, we're not necessarily where you think we are, and also don't assume just because somebody lives in a destination, that's also what their audience is. So even though I live in Morocco, my audience is not Moroccans. That's not who reads my site.
If you're looking for an American audience in Morocco, right, and you're looking in America, and you want to bring Americans over to help you create content, you're missing out on a huge value of an American that lives in Morocco already.
Right.
Dubai being such an international place, if your business is here in Dubai, there's a very good chance, well, we can find Peruvian people, and there's a very good chance you'll find somebody close by who is creating really good content and reaching your audience. You don't have to go to that country to find them.
Yeah, so I think just really target who is the audience that you want to capture, and which influencers already have that audience. Like, that's the right person you want to work with, not necessarily based on where they are geographically. Yeah.
Yeah, I would completely agree with everything that's been said. I think the point Matt was making earlier about looking for a blogger that's been established pre-pandemic is super important. If you find someone that's survived the last few years, you're dealing with a blogger that's got true sort of perseverance, if you like, and is determined to deliver results. I would also add, in terms of, obviously, it goes without saying, when you contact a blogger, request their media kit, you'll get insights into where their traffic is from, what ages of the demographic, basically the demographics of who their audience is. Look also at the niche of the blogger. We've mentioned working with regional bloggers, but if you are particularly focused on food or luxury or budget travel, find a blogger that specializes in those niches, and that's perhaps stating the obvious, but you'd be surprised that people sometimes come to me, say, I worked with XYZ and it didn't work out, and I say, well, you've got a luxury product, did you work with a luxury travel blogger? And the answer isn't always yes.
No, it's true. The basics always bear repeating, and because we live in this world, they're the basics for us, but they are not for people who are just considering it for the first time, which I'm sure some people here are probably considering it for the first time. So
Sure.
We have 10 minutes, so we'll have a little time for questions at the end. And by the way, following this talk immediately here in the Travel Tech Theater, there will be an influencer networking event. A bunch of influencers are coming in, so if you're interested in meeting some, that's what's going to happen here afterwards. So, but with our last few minutes before we do a question session, let's expand on this talk about how to work with travel bloggers, and specifically, what do these relationships look like when you create say you found that person, they have the audience, they have the niche. What does a relationship like this look like when you're doing it long term? What should people ask them for? What should they expect? I know pre-COVID, I would recommend to people, make sure that when you buy, ask somebody to promote you. You're not just paying them to post you on their blog and post you on their Instagram, but also that they provide you with content that you own. Maybe that's blog posts, maybe that's photographs, maybe that's video, but something you can use for your own social media that you can use for your own website. That should be part of it. And usually these relationships work both ways. If you want someone to represent your brand and promote your brand, and they make it a wonderful video about the experience they had with you, you should be taking that and promoting it on your social media, because it makes you look fantastic to show them talking about how great you are. It should be a mutually promotional relationship usually. That's how you can get the most benefit from it. So how would you guys recommend, if you were to start a long-term relationship with somebody today at networking, what would you recommend that you do together?
I think it goes back again to knowing what your goals are, but something I wanted to suggest that I've seen happening a lot through COVID, a little bit before, a bit during, and now coming out a lot is operators, especially white labeling tours with influencers. So, for example, say you have a company that's here in Dubai and you want to do group tours, right? So you might work with someone like Veronica to say, hey, Veronica, I have this company. I would love to white label a tour with you. It can be your tour that you sell, you represent. This is how we're going to work out the financials of this. This is what I'll give you. This is what I'll offer. You know, just work out the deal like that, and then she can offer it to her audience as her tour. And you will be, I think you will be surprised at how well this does.
It's amazing how many, this started pre-COVID, but it continues. A lot
I like
of
the idea.
long-term bloggers and influencers have started running their own tours in the past 5 years. A huge number. And it is surprising how successful they are, how fast they sell out.
Yeah.
And they've just started doing more and more and more and becoming part-time tour guides.
Right. And it works out because not everybody wants to take on the responsibility of it, right? Like I chose to start my own company, but that's a lot of work, as you know, and it's a complete other business. A lot of people don't want to do that. So working with somebody who's already established and already has an operating license and already has all the legal things in place to make this happen is very attractive for somebody who has an audience that's eager, hungry, wants to come, wants to travel, and they already have the built-in audience for you. I mean, it's a really great opportunity.
So in my particular case, if somebody wanted to work with me, the most common business relationship for me is when somebody has an account on the blog. They use that to share editorial content as a means of, I suppose, soft selling their own business. At the end of every article they write is a signature, much like you get on the end of an email with a link through to their website. So I was showing somebody earlier an account for someone that has holiday rentals in Barcelona, and she's written, I don't know, maybe nearly 100 articles on the blog. Each one of those carries a signature to her site and gives her great exposure to our audience. But for other business relationships, we also do things like sponsored posts or indeed sponsored trips and things like that as well as we come out of COVID.
So in our case, we put together travel itineraries showcasing activities to do with families in different destinations. And we put together the itineraries, sometimes together with tourism boards, but sometimes based on our own research. We choose the activities that we want to carry on, and we feature the ones that actually work with detailed information about how to book it themselves. But what happens a lot is that people write us, to book it on their behalf, and we're not an agency, but we would definitely welcome the opportunity for the content to drive action. So it doesn't only stay in the great content, how interesting this piece is, but where can I book, and can I do it through you? Can you help me with that? Can you guide me in the right direction? And sometimes a link is not enough. Sometimes they want somebody to really take it on board. So that's, I think, what could work into a longer-term relationship.
Excellent. So, yeah, to summarize, I think coming out of COVID, things have changed a lot. Working with influencers is not getting somebody to post you on their Instagram, which was a super common thing to do pre-COVID. What we have learned is that only the best of the best have made it through. So at least for now, until a bunch of new people show up, if you see somebody worked pre-COVID still here, they're probably good to work with. The preferred way to work together is to build a deep working relationship. Find the one right person or the two right people that hit your audience, hit your niche, and that you get along with business-wise, and build a deep relationship for creating content both for them that promotes your brand, also for your brand to promote itself, and even in some cases, create custom products around that person and sell it to their audience because their audience loves that person. This is how we're finding that people are making the most money, finding the most success by working with bloggers these days. And the future is, well, really good for those of us that are left. So now, to wrap up, I think we have a few minutes still to take questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions?
Hello, my name is Vlad. Thanks a lot for your presentation and interesting topics. I believe the question is on top of everybody's mind. What this process will assume in regards to budget range? Is it a specific interval, 15, 20, 25%?
Budget range when it comes to,
Paying
can you
the
elaborate a
influencer.
little bit?
Yeah,
Paid,
yeah.
that's a very broad question.
A range.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're asking for, though, right? Like what kind of content you want created, or what exactly the project is
Packages.
that you're looking for.
For packages.
So in my, you're asking what budget you need to work with a blogger. Yeah.
Exactly.
So the very short answer from my perspective is you can have an account on a luxury travel blog for as little as around $700. And that's a lifetime's membership to post on the site. No annual fees or anything. But there are bloggers out there that will work for a lot less, but in life, as with all things, you get what you pay for. And to have, I would say, to have a more meaningful relationship like Matt's been talking about, a more long-term one, more realistically, I would say a few $1,000s and up.
Yeah, so I mean, as somebody who's done a lot of trips, set up or arranged these sorts of things for people, what you'll find is, say, you are often going to want to create content for your brand. Say, hire a photographer and you're going to have to pay that person $800 a day. Normally, you can find a blogger or influencer who is a professional photographer who, for that same price range, will not only do that photography for you, they'll also go and promote you in addition to it. So you're just going to have you're just going to get more for your money by looking for that person, and they're also going to know your audience and what appeals to them. So it's usually a good match. So when you think of budget, think of how much would I pay to create content. It's going to be similar to that, but you're usually going to walk away with, the promotion is almost a bonus in a lot for short-term relationships. The bigger the relationship gets, the longer you're going to do it, the bigger the contract is, the lower the price is going to be.
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider is just keep in mind, because many of us are doing this professionally, like say I'm coming to your destination and it's a 3-day trip, like that's 3 days out of my workday that I need to be able to recuperate the costs for. So either that needs to be included in the package somehow, or I need to actually receive money that pays my bills for those days that that I'm out, or the time that it takes to create the campaign if we're not actually traveling. So just think of, I would definitely consider like what is the content that's being created and delivered, plus what is the time that's going into that I can't put towards a different project.
The other thing I would add to that, if you were to go on a 3-day trip, it's not only the time spent on trip, it's the time spent perfecting that content when you get back home, promoting that content, and some of that work might go on for weeks or even months afterwards. So that's worth bearing in mind as well.
Thank you very much for attending the talk, you guys. Thank you very much, guys, for coming.